All right, guys, what is up? And welcome back to the channel. We are back with you with another episode of the VE Pump video series after a little bit of a hiatus. We are extremely busy, lots of different stuff going on here, so we're trying to film this stuff in between all of that. And we're back for the next one, which we're not super excited about. We're not going to be as excited.
Everyone else is.
Yeah, everybody else has been like, when is the towing video? And it's just not, I don't know. I don't get that into it. Granted, yes, I'm all about towing. That's what these trucks are for. But it is way overthought, I guess. Towing setups are way overthought. It's really not that complicated. It's pretty much literally what we said last video. So we're going to get into basically what we said last video. And then obviously we're going to talk about compounds in this video because everybody wants to know about towing and compounds. That's like all the hype.
Right. And this is all, I guess we'll call it budget friendly. This isn't, and this isn't stuff that you need to run water meth pulling a hill or something ignorant like that.
Nobody.
If you were born prior to 1980 something, you probably do that.
Yeah, guys, you don't need water meth
for
towing. That's it literally is going to make it hotter. I don't understand that whole deal. Maybe if it's just water, and even then that's still dumb. But anyways, we're going to get right into it here. So towing setups for your VE, obviously top right over here, or top left for you guys, I don't know, is going to be supporting mods. This is a given in every single video. These setups are anywhere from 350 horsepower to 450 horsepower very easily. You need supporting mods. These are not P-pump trucks. You need head studs. You need a good trans that can hold the power. So either a get rag with a good clutch or a 47 swap, because 518s and 727s tow awful with that non-lockup converter. And they get hot.
And a lift pump.
Yes.
Whether HVLP or air dog or the like, that is what's required.
Yeah, so you definitely need that stuff. And I do want to say, if you're going to have an auto trans, if you're going to go 47 RE, RH, whatever, and you are going to plan on towing heavy, I would recommend with that going ahead and putting a nice flex plate in it so you don't rip the center out of that stock flex plate. And
nothing more than a stock stall converter.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, nothing more than a stock stall converter, so like 1800 stall. And then you're going to want to put a billet input shaft in it more than likely, just because the shock load, because some of you guys don't know how to use a lockup switch and things like that. Just always remember, you don't want to do locked downshifts. That's a good way to break an input, especially while towing. So avoid all that stuff. But if you're going to be towing heavy, make 400 or so horsepower, highly recommend just going ahead and biting the bullet, putting a billet input in your trans. So that's the supporting mods. Should be pretty self-explanatory there. Now to get into the fuel side of things, no different than what we have said before. You're going to buy a $360 pump package from Evan Ratcliffe at Ratman Performance. That consists of fuel pin, governor spring, delivery valves.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, obviously.
Right. And this exact setup can be done with a comp pump as well.
Yeah, this you can tow with the comp pump as well. We do need to include that because people will ask, hey, can you tow with the comp? Yes. You can tow with a comp pump, which there's nothing that really makes them competition, but that's what everybody calls them. I think we should hit on timing, because obviously the more timing you add, the more bottom end you lose up to a certain point. So if you're already like skipped a tooth and you really start getting after it timing wise, you're going to sacrifice bottom end power, and that's torque.
Well, I suppose we should probably keep this towing oriented. So maxing out the timing for the pump and injector and turbo setup that is here is probably not necessary.
Yeah, I would agree.
So you're not going to be towing with these at 3,200 RPMs.
Yeah. Could you still tow with this with it skipped a tooth? Absolutely. But you're going to want to pull it pretty far back in the slots while you're towing. And then for injector, just like last video, a good 5x12 or a 5x14 that is quality. That'll do the trick. Again, 350 to 450 horsepower. It can go beyond that with the comp pump, no problem. And then for air, just like last video, we're going to go with a whole set HX35 frame, or if you have a 351, you can use the 351 frame. And it's either going to be a 60, 67, 9 or 12, or a 62, 67, 9 or 12 cm. So, I don't know, there's guys running a 62, 67, 12 from, that has Evans 12 cm that have stock fuel and tow like crazy, and they can basically have it to the floor all the time and it will not get hot. And they enjoy that. So,
I think the optimal single here is probably the 60 millimeter compressor wheel, just because you can use all of it.
oh yeah, you're using every bit of it. And you guys are going to ask, well, with single turbo and towing, aren't you guys worried about EGTs? In all reality, no, I'm not. But you guys are going to ask about compounds. But before we do that, Andy, what are acceptable EGTs again, even though we just discussed this?
You can hold these engines at 1250 degrees and even hotter than that for 12 hours straight, and it will never hurt anything.
Yeah. So if you guys are pulling a grade and you're getting after it and it's hitting right at 1250 but isn't really going any higher, that is literally exactly what the engine's rated for. That's not hot. Let's be very clear. Obviously, you guys at elevation that are towing heavy and pulling big passes, like that's a different story, because you guys are going to get hotter than 1250 probably. So maybe compounds out there make a lot more sense, but towing is very attainable with a single. It is not a problem, especially one as snappy as this. But with that being said, let's get into the compounds a little bit, because you guys ask about compound sizing, and there's a whole bunch of misconceptions about compound sizing, especially with VE trucks. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, so I think the general consensus is at the largest, you run a 60, 67, 12 or 60, 67, 9. And that has been like the staple over the years, right? Your S300Gs, your K27s, all of those have been the designated manifold turbos in whoever's compound kit you want to buy for one of these.
Yep.
In my opinion, that is the smallest turbo you should have on the manifold in a compound setup for these.
Yes, I would agree. And that kind of moves us into the Atmo charger. So no, you are not going to run an S300 frame charger on the Atmosphere. I know whose other videos you guys are watching, and they recommend like a K27 and an S369. Do not do that. It will get just as hot as that.
Your compressor
it's literally
wheel
going to get just as hot.
on the Atmosphere, especially if it's a 369, will be way outside of its efficiency range and just put a lot of hot air back into the engine.
Yeah. So on the absolute smallest side of the spectrum here, we're going to go with a 475, so a 75 96 with a 115 T6 or a 132 T6. And those are divided T6 housings. That is the absolute smallest you should be going on your Atmo charger. You don't need a 472, you don't need a K31, you don't need none of that.
You don't need anything T4.
Yeah, nothing
Anything
T4. I don't care what brand it is. None of that. You do not need a T4 on the Atmo. That is, you're wasting your time, and there's no advantage. You can go bigger, not lose any spool time, and it's going to stay cooler. It's going to make more power, all of that.
Like we'll get into in the next video or 2 or 3, your turbo on the manifold, so your 60 or your 62 is going to dictate the drivability, how quick it spools, how snappy it is, how torquey it is down low, and then your large frame charger on the Atmosphere is going to dictate your overall power, and it's going to multiply air and cool down the whole forced air system.
Absolutely. So we said the smallest, 475, and if we're going to say the biggest, and this is for the majority of you, because obviously I've gone bigger and do not regret it at all. But for the majority of you guys, the absolute biggest I would go is a 488. So an 88, 96, 115 T6. Now, could some of you go with a 132? Probably, but a 115 housing would be fine. And you can see here, the turbine wheel is the exact same. So we're just changing compressor wheel here. That is it.
Yep. And a good, I guess kind of a budget source to get these from, because there's a lot of Chinese eBay S400s and stuff like that out there. PSR turbo
Pulsar
systems and VS Racing, they either have these or equivalents that just aren't labeled as S400s, but those are usually sub $1,000,
Yeah.
So for atmosphere and manifold turbo, if you have any welding skills, you can be in it for less than $2,500,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Because, I mean, we know you guys are 12 valve guys, first gen guys, very cheap.
Very resourceful.
Yeah. So do not be afraid of the VS Racing chargers for your Atmo. Do not be afraid of the Pulsar ones. Both are very budget friendly, both last. You can buy them in ball bearing units, journal bearing units, you name it. Not to take away from my guy here, Mr. Duncan Finley Precision Inductions. If you want big gangster hull sets or stock appearings, that is the guy to talk to. But yeah, you can, if you want to get into this very budget minded, you can buy the turbo itself for very cheap.
Right.
And don't MIG your piping together if you're going to do that, preferably.
What are we going to wire our drains together?
No, this is actually a really big deal. For some reason, well, I say for some reason, I've done it before, but there's only one turbo drain in your 12 valve block. We're not like the 24 valve guys and the common rail guys that have two. We've only got one, and a lot of people wire the turbo drains together. And believe it or not, that will indeed make the turbos push oil. I've done this before, and I would like to say even bigger than what Dash 12 would be, because the ID of that hose was way bigger than a Dash 12 AN fitting. So it will not work. Some say that it has worked for the time being, but if you're beating on it, it does not work. I've always pushed oil with those things. The best way to do it is to weld a bung in your pan, and I know that's going to turn a lot of people off from this. It's part of it. I don't know what to tell you. You need to have two separate turbo drains, because if you put all this together and then you kill a turbo or it starts pushing oil everywhere, all you're going to do is complain about it and then sell it and realize you've wasted a ton of money.
And I personally don't see an issue with punching a hole in the pan and leaving the pan on.
Yeah, I mean,
It'll wash it down. The strainer's not going to pick it up.
Not that hard.
If you're really, really concerned, it takes an extra 30 minutes to get the oil pan off in the pickup tube.
Yeah.
I don't know on the first gen stuff.
On first gen, it's hard. I've pulled lots of second and third gen oil pans while they're in the truck, but first gens I don't know as much. Obviously, you got to lift it out of the cradle a little bit and stuff to get it out there, but it's not that big of a deal. But to elaborate on this, like I said earlier, the big no-nos here are no S369s, no S300 frames as your atmospheric charger. So the charger out front, no S300 frames, and if it's S400 frame, no 83 or 87 turbines, no T4, no 83, no 87 turbines. Yeah. That is, you're wasting your time.
I'd even steer clear of the 93 that is out there now.
Yeah, there is one that's floating around out there.
That turbo alone is more expensive than two of these. So.
Yeah. So a 96 turbine is a 9688. So that is really the smallest turbine wheel I would go with. Mine's like the one in my truck is a 113 101, I believe is what it is. So that is the absolute smallest stuff I would go. Those are the no-goes there. Another question is going to be external wastegate. Like people see them on my truck. You do not need an external wastegate in this application. It will actually decrease your drivability a very good amount.
Yeah, so both of these turbos down here can be spec'd without a gate, but the 9cm whole set turbine housings have a fantastic gate, as well as the 12s.
Yep.
As long as they're punched out and you have the correct spring mechanical wastegate setup on it. So
that's a no-go on the external gate. And then obviously, if you guys are still concerned with towing manners and all that, there's lots of aftermarket support out there. Obviously, by this time, I would sure hope you have an intake on your truck. You'll have an exhaust. Next things you could kind of get into is if you're going to replace the turbo, a lot of guys, or you're going to put a manifold on it, like a Steed Speed or a 3-piece manifold, because you don't want to crack the ears off your head anyway. And that's a good purchase. So an exhaust manifold is something that you should do just for the sake of not cracking the ears off your head, at least.
Yeah, and you'll have some extra weight hanging off of it as well. So
yeah, especially with compounds. Another thing is going to be an intercooler upgrade. It's pretty common knowledge that a 7.3 intercooler drops right into these. I say drops right in. There's some slight modification that has to be done that you can get on the forums. And a stock one will fit. I wouldn't, if I was going to be spending the time to do it, I would go ahead and get an aftermarket one of some sort that's a larger one. If you really want to get aggressive with the cutoff wheel and the Sawzall, you can get a second gen on 3 intercooler like I have. That's pretty pretty nice, but it also takes up the whole core support. And then there's stuff like single turbo stuff. There's like exhaust brakes that go in line that people use and things like that. I would have to assume that you are getting very aggressive on the towing side of things if you think you have to have one of those.
You should probably look into some suspension and driveline upgrades before an exhaust brake.
Yeah, it's going to handle much better with that. So towing bags, that's one. I know whenever I was going to end up doing it on mine, I was going to use the second gen style bags that go to the outside of the frame rail and bolt there. So definitely some helper bags. Oh, Brute didn't kick the cord off. That's surprising. And then a good trailer brake controller is obviously worth its weight in gold. If you have trailer brakes, use them. Don't be so hard on the truck brakes.
And I think a lot of these trucks probably have a fifth wheel plate with a goose ball adapter.
Oh yeah, typically most stuff is always just welded to the frame.
Yeah, so make sure they're either welded to the frame well, or you have a legitimate B&W or equivalent hitch bolted to the frame and not something that's just welded to the bed.
Yes, please don't put yourself or anybody else in danger. Don't risk ruining your first gen, smashing the cab completely because you had some janky gooseneck ball set up. But yeah, those are really the big main points, I would say. The towing setups are very simple, and people just overcomplicate this stuff. You can tow with all the way up to a 488, no problem. Obviously, the smaller, like the 475, some of you guys might like it better. You're going to see EGT benefits from going probably larger compressor. But yeah, it's that simple. And all of these setups can make, honestly, compounds and a good 5x14, and if it has delivery valves, oh yeah, it's definitely going to do 500 horsepower if you get aggressive with timing. Hands down. A little bit added efficiency on the Atmo can go a long ways. So I think that's about all I got. I don't know.
Yeah, short, sweet, and no 369s.
Yes, no 369 as your Atmo. It's that simple. Don't do it. But that is going to wrap this one up. I think it's simple, and the next video is going to be our 500 plus. So what do we call that? Hot Street.
Hot Street.
Yeah. So we're gonna have the Hot Street video next, and
the Russell.
The Russell Mobile. And it just gets funner from there. That's honestly more what I'm interested in. This stuff is just like, I don't know. It needs to be talked about because a lot of you guys are interested in it and use these trucks for that for some odd reason. But
I don't even want to tow with my third gen.
Yeah, towing heavy with the first gen is a freaking nightmare. But Brian is pulling a house as we speak, probably. So.
And Brutus is looking at shadow people in the corner, so we should get out of here.
Yeah, we should. So until next time.
Keep your rotary pumps.
And keep kicking it old school. Peace out.